You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 15, Masquerade.
Welcome back into another episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm Charlene Schmidt. Ashley V. Robinson could not be here today, but she is going to be here today in spirit because she wrote the recap that we're going to read later.
That's right. And this week, the recap is going to be about episode 15, Masquerade. On our podcast, what we do here each and every episode of this animated series, we look at Star Trek Prodigy and see why they are special every single episode and see if there are any morals, meanings, or messages that we've had learned. And remember, because we say this every podcast, remember, this is an in-depth review podcast. So if you haven't seen Masquerade yet, put us on pause. And we're back. And thank you for joining us for the second half of our podcast discussing Masquerade. I'm just kidding. We have a whole other podcast ahead of you.
It was a really fast first half. Wow.
Exactly. I know we do this quickly because we are so excited about talking about this show. So again, you can put this on pause, come back to us when you're ready to come back to us. We'll wait, and then you can hear us talk all about it.
That's right. This podcast, Mission Log Prodigy, is produced for YouTube and as a regular podcast. So if you are watching us, be sure to hit that like button, do the share button, subscribe to us on Roddenberry Entertainment on the YouTube channel. That helps us out a lot. And if you're listening to us, hey, go to your podcatcher of choice, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all the podcast things. And give us like a little bit of a review there too. And make sure that you're subscribed there. However you catch your podcasts, all the Roddenberry podcasts. You can also follow Mission Log Prodigy on Twitter, as long as Twitter's still going to be a thing going forward. We don't know how long, at ML_Prodigy to keep up with all of the latest news and updates.
Yeah, and before we jump into Ashley's recap, we just want to let everyone know or remind everyone why this particular podcast is so special. It's special to us. I hope it's special to all of you because we love hearing from the younger Prodigy fans out there. And we would love for you to be able to share your thoughts with us. So please send us a 1 to 2 minute voice message at missionlog-prodigy. That's the dash, not the word dash, missionlog-prodigy at roddenberry.com. Again, that's missionlog-prodigy at roddenberry.com. And in your voicemail message, please answer these questions. What is your first name and age? Did you like the episode? What was your favorite part? And what did you learn?
Yes, the all-important question, that last one right there. We always look forward to hearing your comments, and they will be featured at the end of our show. So how about we do what we do and kick things off and answer those questions ourselves?
All right, let's jump right into it. What do you think, Shar?
Well, did you like the episode, Norm?
Okay, so Ashley and I talked about this last podcast, and there are going to be kind of like these episodes where they aren't my favorite per se. And kids out there, that's just a fair. I'm basically saying in a long way, I didn't like this episode for Prodigy, but I like this episode more than I've liked more than most of the episodes in Star Trek that I've seen. Does that make any sense? It's like a double negative,
Yes.
But it's not necessarily a positive. So
we have similar assessments of this episode. I understand exactly what you mean.
yeah, and there are going to be episodes that need to be just nuts and bolts, just kind of the story and to move a lot of things forward. You kind of feel that it's not the type of story that makes you fall in love with this series, but it is the kind of story that is necessary so that you will fall in love with the episodes that are coming after this episode.
Sure. Keeps the wheels turning.
Yeah. How about you, Shar?
Yeah, I'm with you. This one is just okay for me. I found a lot of the story predictable, and that's not very typical of this show. So that took me aback a little bit, but more on that later. That said, just a just okay episode of Prodigy is better than most things on television and better than most things, like most just okay episodes of Star Trek. Like you said, this show has set such a high bar for itself that an episode that is utilitarian like this one can't possibly measure up in every single way because that's just not what it's built to do.
Right. There's a certain level of can you sustain such a high bar, such a high level of quality with every single episode? And sometimes, like episodes, say, like All the World's a Stage, it goes to this next level of scoring, like in ratings, like personal ratings. But this episode, if for anything, if 10 is our baseline, and we're talking about levels 1 through 10 or ranks 1 through 10, if 10 is our baseline for most of our episodes, this is probably just slightly under 10, which makes it higher
Right.
ranking than pretty much everything that we've seen out there that we like anyway, right?
Exactly. So it's just in comparison to other episodes of Prodigy that do have, say, more of a payoff, reasons that you fall in love with this story and the characters. It's got some very stiff competition going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Prodigy is an amazing show. It's done nothing but hit all the marks, really. And especially for a first season, that's a really difficult thing to do. And we've been nothing short of impressed.
I know, it's funny on Twitter, somebody said, it may have been Twitter, it may have been Mastodon, because, there's a shift in the social media space. But somebody said, it goes, I'm so excited to finally have caught the second half of Prodigy. And then I replied to this person, we're still in the first season.
Yeah.
It's just the break between episodes 1 through 10 and now episodes 11 through 15. That break in between 10 and 11 was 8 months.
Yeah, a very long break.
And I'm so
I've heard
sad.
that too.
and I'm so sad that we're at the what they call the 50-yard line or the 50% mark of our back half of these episodes. We have 5 episodes left after this.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of things that are going to be just packing these stories, but yeah, we only have 5. Oh my God.
I know.
It goes by way too quick, doesn't it?
It does. So we're going to have to really savor it and savor all these moments. Speaking of savoring our favorite moments, so what was your favorite part in this episode?
I gotta give it to when Gwen said to Dal, "You don't need fixing." Boom. That is right where some of the big morals, messages, and meanings get boiled down to 5 words. So that takes the trophy for me. But there was like a lot of little charming things that I loved about this episode, and I'll have to bring those up a little bit later. Just some really cute moments in this episode.
Yeah.
How about you?
So I'm not a big "I told you so" type of guy, but I did make a certain prediction a few episodes ago, and I've been following. We've all been following this track of who is this Ensign Essentia really?
Yeah,
and
you
now
kind of nailed that one.
And we found out, and I said on our Twitter account at ML_Prodigy on Twitter that the gloves are off, like literally, because that was the key for me. Seeing these strange gloves that Ensign Essentia was wearing that no one else was really wearing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. But the bigger thing, and we're probably going to get into this later on in the show, the bigger question, aside from the big reveal of Ensign Essentia being a Valnukat, and I'm not sure, is she supposed to be future Gwen? I didn't really get that. I'm not sure.
I that's the big mystery, right? Is this reveal opened up so many new questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have many.
Okay. And then also, like, how are they hiding Dreadnought's power signature from inside the Dauntless? Because, you'd be able to find these
technology can mask it.
Yeah. So lots of questions, folks. All right. Last big thing here, Shar, is like, what did we learn? What did you learn?
Let's see. There's 2 big things. I mean, the morals, messages, and meanings are pretty straightforward in this one. So, number 1, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Janeway said it. We saw it in action. And then 2, the really big important one is you do not need to fix yourself to fit in or feel good about yourself. Like what you might see as an imperfection of yourself, that's what makes you unique, just like for Dal. And you can work with that, maybe not work against it.
Yeah. There are, with an episode that has like so many things happening, and I think this is about Prodigy, in general, there are those moments where everything just kind of quiets down and you feel that message. Like, and it's usually like Janeway that kind of, makes that very clear for one of the members of the crew, and usually Dal.
Yeah, I was definitely feeling Dal's motions, range of emotions through this episode. So yeah, that definitely, like, that part of it really did work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I said earlier it was just okay. So even, like I said, even a just okay episode of Prodigy has a lot to offer. What about you though?
Yeah.
What did you learn?
Well, here's a big lesson. Now, here's kind of like again, when things get quiet and you really kind of focus on what the story is really trying to say, be yourself. Don't try to be someone other than who you are, who you want to be. Not everyone, wants you to be anyone else than yourself. So that's being a follower, trying to figure out what everyone else wants from you. That's not being a captain. That's what Dal wants to be. Dal wants to be a captain, but he also wants to be everything to everyone. And that's not one and the same thing. And we know this from captains in Star Trek, where captains they are a very lonely, high, let's say low percentile of leaders at the top of the food chain in Starfleet that are very lonely. That don't allow people to get close to them because they need to make choices.
Life or death choices.
Right. So
yeah, that's a very difficult responsibility that Dal is just starting to really understand. And on top of it, this episode displays that he is still growing up. Let's not forget that he's still a kid.
Yeah.
And that's tough on its own, much less all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not lost on like a lot of us of a certain age that what he went through in the genetic upgrades. Well, we'll get to that. We're probably still those. So we should really.
I know, hard not to jump ahead.
Really jump into the recap. So thanks, Shar. Great observations for our questions. Hope to hear some great answers from our young cadets as well. But it's time for the recap for Star Trek Prodigy, episode 15, Masquerade, written by Nikhil S. Jayaram and directed by Sung Shin, and recap written by Ashley V. Robinson. And I promised Ashley that I would do like a lot of hand gestures and what she does, but I want to, but I can't. So you're going to have to use your imagination, people, especially listening just to the audio version of this.
Imagine it's Ashley with all the wonderful hand gestures, because she does a really good job with that.
Right. I promised her I would. I'm not nearly as finely tuned, in her body animations as she is. So I would only embarrass myself and embarrass her worse.
It's all right. You're going to do your best.
All right. So here we go with a recap. Remember at the end of last week's episode when we were on the border of the neutral zone and real life Janeway was risking everyone's safety for an all-out war against the Romulans? Well, smash cut to this episode begins 5 seconds after that aboard the Protostar, where yes, we are making repairs and that is an important thing, but Murph has a new body. Red alert, Murph has a new baby boy body. He looks like Gumby, but with Murph's head, and I was not emotionally prepared for this.
I was not prepared for phasers.
Oh yeah, running around with phasers.
Side note, dangerous.
Yeah. So Dal's not jealous of Murph, which is incorrect, but he is jealous of the crew's love of Captain Akona, which is also incorrect. Repairs aren't going as well as possible, so the crew follow Akona's suggestion of taking refuge on Noble Island, which definitely doesn't sound shady at all. What could sound less shady than an independent starport along the neutral zone? I can't think of anything. Back aboard the Dauntless is IRL Janeway versus 2 Romulans, and the odds aren't looking great. Admiral Jellicoe orders Janeway away from the neutral zone in order to keep peace with the Romulans and to destroy the Protostar rather than allow it to fall into Romulan control. Meanwhile, the Protostar arrives at Noble Island only to learn it's focused on scientific progress, which feels a lot more like unauthorized experimentation than I am comfortable with. Dal wonders aloud if this potential haven is too good to be true, and Holo Janeway tells him it probably is. Akona introduces the crew to a client of his, Dr. Jago, who, fun fact, happens to be a geneticist. She can tell immediately how unique Dal is and is determined to figure out who and what he is. Dr. Jago reveals Dal is 100% completely unique, and not in the trite way of always being, unique and special, because we are, but in the way that the results of experimentation by Dr. Eric Sung. Everyone who's watched 90 Star Trek series knows what this means and which other characters Dal is immediately and deeply tied to, and viewers who aren't as familiar with the expanded canon are totally fine. It's kind of a thing. It's its own bubble. It's okay. We can move past this. So, TLDR, Dal was created in a lab and is an exercise in splicing. Human plus 26 variants, an augment for those who knows what that means. And if you don't feel bad. Dal isn't really sure how he feels about it, in a very fair and measured reaction for him. To help Dal, who is obviously struggling with the revelation about his identity, Dr. Jago enhances his qualities. Again, what could possibly go wrong? Ensign Essentia and the Diviner continue to cozy up to each other aboard the Dauntless, and all of Norman's and Ashley's pet theories from last episode rise to the surface. Essentia suggests to Janeway they enter the neutral zone covertly. Janeway admits the Romulans are probably already doing the same thing, and the game is afoot. Dal meets up with the rest of the crew, and again, he is definitely different. Can't worry about that, because Romulans are boarding the Protostar. They knock Jankum, Janeway, and Zero on their butts and move immediately for Dal. Down on the surface, Okana cuts a quick exit because he's a giant butthead. The second the Romulans make their presence known, Dal is able to fight off their attacks while Gwyn and Rock realize his implant is malfunctioning. He's getting weirder and angrier as it continues, and there's nothing for it but to take Dal back to the Protostar, even with the Tal Shiar hot on their heels. When the Dauntless sees the Tal Shiar boarding the Protostar, Admiral Janeway fires off 2 torpedoes. Everything seems to be at a loss. Have no fear, Murph is here. When Rock unleashes him from his baby Bjorn at full power, he is able to overcome the Tal Shiar operatives and save his crew. Fortunately, the torpedoes are also diverted at the last minute, and the Protostar and our crew live to see another day. Dal gets his implant straightened out and apologizes for the wild behavior he has been exhibiting. Gwyn confirms that despite his odd actions, he's definitely the superior captain to Okona. Murph is given the rank of security officer, and the crew is finally complete in this new evolution. Things on the Dauntless only getting darker. Essentia bursts in on the Diviner, activates Dreadnought. How does she know how to do that? And reveals herself to be a Valnukat, who has also been sent to reclaim the Protostar. Dun, dun, dun. The end. Thank you, Ashley, for that. That was awesome. I hope I did you justice.
Amazing recap. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, Norm, for that read. I'm so glad somebody else just really doesn't like Okana and has no problems expressing that.
Raise of hands out there when you listen to this. If you're not a big fan of Okana, go ahead. Give us a high
five. All the
hands.
Yeah.
Lots of things to talk about, Char. Lots of observations to take a look at. Let's jump into it. Let's start with you.
Okay. Well, where do we even begin? Okay, one of the big questions I had. Let's start off with the Dauntless and where its location might be in proximity to Noble Isle, because it's got to be really close, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah.
Because, okay, otherwise, how is this ship tracking the movements so well, so closely? And then also, how can it be in range to fire torpedoes at the Protostar if it's not really close?
Yeah, there's a weird thing with the spatial relationship of where we think the Protostar is, where I was about to say the Voyager, where the Dauntless is. I know, force of habit. And okay, so I'm about to say it again. I said the Dauntless is right on the edge of the neutral zone. They're not allowed in. We knew that from the last episode where the Romulan captain said, you'll be in violation of treaty. Commander Tyses tells Janeway, you can't violate treaty. End of story. That's where they're hanging out. They're not even really kind of like pushing the boundaries until they do. But the Protostar goes to this place called Noble Isle because Okona said so, because, he's trustworthy. And
it's totally convenient for him.
Yeah. I mean, this is all about what he wants. And, he doesn't really care about the kids, puts them at risk. But anyway, the point is, where are they exactly? Like, so you can't, Starfleet can't go into the neutral zone. The Romulans can because they're coming through the neutral zone.
Yeah. That's allowed? Why?
How neutral is it?
I have a feeling we're going to learn a little more about this. Like maybe the Romulans have broken some rules, so maybe Admiral Janeway is going to break some rules because fair's fair. I don't know. I hope we find out like next week, honestly.
It's a strange thing. And you know what? Maybe we should ask Dr. Trek, Larry Nemechek, fan and friend of Star Trek and Mission Log, so he might know. Also, you might be able to find it in something that it's super really cool to look at, the stellar cartography maps of Larry Nemechek's.
That's
check
right.
those out. Yeah.
Yes.
But
you've got that handy. Go for it.
Here's another thing that I don't know how you feel about it, But on Mission Log, like the standard Mission Log podcast, and especially when we covered Picard on Mission Log Live, I'm not really the biggest fan of the name dropping of Sung anymore. I think it's completely overused because why not? He's the super geneticist whose name cannot die throughout the ages. So of course he's going to be in there.
No, some sort of Sung incarnation must just be inserted somewhere into every aspect of every Trek series. Yeah, I audibly groaned at that. It makes enough sense, but really, we had to do that again?
Yeah.
Maybe it is coming off of season 2 of Picard, but I just thought that, okay, that answers some questions, but then opens up a whole lot more. And maybe we'll learn some things. Like, is there anybody else like Dal out there who's an augment and stuff like that? But this reveal in and of itself was pretty underwhelming.
You know, here's the funny thing is that all of these 20 episodes, I think were supposed to have been released before Picard season 2. So the name drop probably wouldn't have been as abrupt, to the ears.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you know what? Maybe our reaction would be a little different if we had not just watched a whole bunch of Dr. Soong genetic stuff.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
Good observation.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been exhausted with the name as much if it came before Star Trek, because we'd be like, "Oh, cool, Soong's out here in the B quadrant." Right.
Right. We'd probably be like maybe fanboying and fangirling out a little more like, oh, hey, there's the Enterprise tie-in. That's cool. Yeah. And by Enterprise, I mean the show, not necessarily the ship.
So Murph Ball, that's a thing now.
Oh my gosh. You know those backpacks people have now for their pets? They look like little space age space helmets.
Yeah, like the cat capsule.
Yeah. Reminded me a lot of that. Thing is, okay, Murph is... I don't know. What is he? Maybe the equivalent of a toddler now for his species. Not a baby.
No.
But not a fully grown Murph just yet. Like how fast is he going to grow out of this thing? Is he going to need like a giant hamster wheel kind of contraption later on?
I wonder what he's going to like if he sleeps, does he like turn into like a puddle when he sleeps, like Odo in a ball?
Does he need a bucket?
Yeah. Or does he even need the ball? Because the ball is funny. I mean, it really is, but it seems like...
Maybe after he learns how to control his phaser fire a little bit, they can let him go without the ball.
That's a good point. And also, he can't sit on things and fire torpedoes at ships.
I think he totally meant to do that.
He did it. It's consistent with what he did before.
Right?
So...
I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And he was having the time of his life with those phasers. But I don't think toddlers and phasers are a good combination. Although this complicates things now that he's the security officer. So he needs to be a trained toddler and use phasers really judiciously.
I don't know if you remember this, but people of a certain age out there were these aliens in a TV show or a cartoon by Hanna-Barbera called The Herculoids. And
I never watched it.
Yeah. So look up characters named Gloop and Gleep. They're these kind of like these amoeba-ish type of aliens like Murph that could do the same things that Murph does, like turn into a parachute or turn into a door that, blocks an elevator so the window's broken, or, wrap themselves up into like, snake type things to be able to take out enemies like they did the Tal Shiar, stuff like that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I'll check that out because I did get a kick out of watching Murph kick some Tal Shiar butt. That was fun.
Speaking of which, remember the captain like had she was staring down the kids with her giant Romulan disruptor. Was it me or was that thing like freakishly large?
I thought maybe it was perspective, but then for Romulans, freakishly large is sometimes a norm. Like think about the huge shoulder padded suits that they wore in TNG.
True. Right.
So maybe that's just a thing for them.
Subtlety may not be their biggest strength. Speaking of subtlety, okay, so the whole thing with Dreadnought, coffee table Dreadnought, which is now a thing, right?
Yeah.
How do you hide something like that on a starship?
Man, I don't know. Sleep mode must be really low energy or something to get away with that.
Put it in sleep.
That's all I can really think of. But now it is active. So is that going to be a thing? Our sensor's going to detect an energy surge and, what happens from there?
Do you think her quarters are in like a pocket universe, like a TARDIS?
I never thought about that.
They are from like the future and stuff. So,
wow. Is it bigger on the inside? That is the big question if we're talking the
right.
TARDIS.
Exactly. So let us know, people, in your comments. We want to hear.
Tell us all of your theories because this reveal, I mean,
Huge,
wow. This
huge.
opens up a whole Pandora's box of questions that we weren't really considering before. Like you knew that there was something to this ensign.
I had my suspicions, and the writing is there. Yeah, if you really kind of like follow what she's saying, the writing kind of leads to this earned moment, I think.
It's true. But also visually, like you notice the gloves without the fingers, but also facially. Essentia and Gwen share a lot of the same facial features.
They do. So
it's like she was hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so she doesn't look exactly like Gwen. She has like some forehead ridges, but that could just be an older version of Gwen, because Gwen's just a teenager right now.
Right. So is she really an older Gwen? I don't know. That leads to my big question, which is just like, how big of a long game is everyone playing here?
Right. Yeah. Well, let's go back to when the Diviner had Gwen created by Dreadnought. That was 17 years in the past. So we're talking a long and maybe much even longer game than 17 years. And remember, folks, if you're listening to this podcast, remember 2 words, 1 word really, and 1 preposition. The Order.
Yes.
It was only mentioned
a long
episode.
time ago.
Yeah.
In our timeline, because it was months and plenty of time to not remember that. But that I think is going to rear its head in a big way coming right up probably next week.
Maybe. And remember, if anything, the Hagemans, Aaron, Danny Bond, all the producers, all the writers, all the clever people behind the scenes, they hide things right in front of you.
Yes.
Right? And you just forget about them, just because we only have so much limited brain activity in space. But when you really got to think about it, the clues are there. So,
right. Which is why it's going to be so much fun after we've seen the full first season to go back and then watch it all again and see all the things that we didn't see and couldn't see the first time around.
Right.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait to binge this show.
One last observation, Char, because I know that you want to get into some higher discussion points.
Sure. Well, how about some littler things that I mentioned earlier? Like props to Rock for understanding how metal would act as a conductor to the lightning.
Yeah.
The space elevator. And like, okay, also, how cute is she when giving her first science log? Like seeing her so happy just gives me all the feels. And I loved her line, science rules and science needs rules.
Yep.
Yes, Rock, I absolutely agree. And maybe Dr. Jago should take some notes.
Yeah, that was so awesome. And I love that Rock is sticking up for pure, clean and regulated science.
She's already an ethical scientist. I'm so proud of her.
Yeah, that was a big stride for her because she could have easily been like tempted, like some other people in this episode were tempted by the easy path, right, to success. Right?
Certainly.
But I think she knows.
How about we get into that?
All right. So this was a heavy episode, I think. And maybe that's why it maybe didn't sit well with me the first time I saw it. I had to watch it a couple of times. But there are a lot of big, kind of like broad stroke type of big message type of things that are happening in this episode. In the first 5 episodes, I've been kind of like tracking, like, why have they been focusing on like a certain theme? But the first 5 episodes, including this one, it has to do a lot with the crew's insecurity, but mostly Dow's insecurity as captain. Sure. So let's look at the end of Immoral Star Part 2. He planned the raid on Tars Lamora. He did the jetpack maneuver. He did, it was his idea to put the Protostar engine in Murph's body. He did all of these things, high risk maneuvers, things that, are befitting a captain. He was bold, he was daring, he was decisive. And now he's not. And I'm wondering, is it because he hasn't been able to do the one thing that he's wanted to do, and that's to get his crew to Starfleet? Does he feel like a failure?
Maybe that is where a lot of this insecurity is boiling up. Plus, a lot of the just really deep inner doubts he has about himself that just come roaring in this one. Also, the fact that Dahl is a teenager means he's still got to learn some lessons the hard way.
Yeah.
And even though Janeway warns him that some things are too good to be true, and they definitely are, not probably, they definitely are. It's everybody's going to have to go through that in some fashion in their point in lives. And I actually felt as an adult that I was almost at a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to the morals, messages, and meanings here, just because I am an adult. I have done, I have learned some lessons the hard way. But you know what? For a kid who is growing up right now, this is probably one of the most profound and influential episodes they could possibly watch for morals, meanings, and messages. And what a good one to reinforce throughout the whole story, both directly and indirectly, like they did here.
And, that's a great point. And I know that Prodigy is in this really interesting space in the fandom where parents and their children, or parents or guardians of younger children, they're watching this, and it's doing the one thing that a series is sometimes challenged to do. It appeals to both generations, appeals to like the adults who love Star Trek, and obviously they know their Star Trek and understand like what's happening in terms of the quote unquote canon of the story. But they also know that the lessons that are being taught are lessons that they can explain to their children or to the people, the younger people that they are responsible for, ranging from ages of, and I'm just going on the sheer ages of our viewers and our listeners, from like 4 to like 14. I mean, that is it's a pretty big audience. And in that, especially like towards your like 12, 13, 14, many of us have been there. Those are like those very impressionable years, for young people, for kids. And one thing that I've seen over the course of this series, that the adults they're not necessarily the best role models in the world, even when it comes to Starfleet. So what I mean by that is the writers for Prodigy, I think that they've made a very, distinct decision to make their adults be questionable. And what I mean, they're not like necessarily like evil or villainous. Some are. But say Nandi was a terrible mother figure, right? For
sure.
Dal.
Okana does not care about the kids.
No, and
he ditches them as soon as it's inconvenient.
He's the cool guy, he's the cool adult where everyone's kind of like hanging out with him. He tells you exactly what you need to hear to make you feel good because he wants something from you.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I have a question for you. Do you think hologram Janeway should have maybe been a little more suspicious and looking out for the kids when it came to Okana?
Well, that's a good question. And I think the interesting thing about hologram Janeway is I think her program responded to like the original group of, young cadets who pretended to be Starfleet. Whether or not that she believed that is a completely other discussion. But I think that she identified that they needed her guidance, and she became that to each of them in a different way. She is what a good leader and a responsible adult is supposed to do, not give the blanket approach of this is what you should all do. This is what you're all expected to be, and here's the bar that you all have to reach. No, she goes and she fine tunes her advice to every single member of the crew. Right. So, and makes their needs her needs. And I think that's really responsible for the writers to show that there's an adult in these kids' lives that isn't on a pedestal, that isn't unreachable, that isn't pandering to them or just shining them on when it comes to, sure, whatever you guys want. But as long as we get what we, the adult want first.
Yeah. You know what I think I'm doing in my own head is I'm expecting hologram Janeway to be more like in real life Janeway, where her mama bear instinct might kick in a little more as the actual Janeway, but hologram Janeway was probably programmed to be a little more hands-off because she was supposed to be advising adult capable cadets, not teenagers and children. So maybe I need to be a little more forgiving of that, but I was kind of screaming at her until she said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, because that was like red alert in my head. But yeah, the fact that the kids were falling to Akana's charms, I was just like, oh no, don't do this. And Janeway's just kind of like she's falling it for it too. She's kind of enjoying the little flirtation. I'm like, oh no, don't, not you too.
Yeah. And they all do, and kind of like, until they don't, or in that moment where they're like, okay, I made a mistake. Right.
Yeah. Well, except for Dahl. Dahl was on to him. He knew this because he's kind of had that like arrogant macho man attitude himself in some version of another. Like maybe he saw, oh, I know what you're doing here. I can see right through that.
Well, it's kind of like you can't con a con man. There's just con men or con people, con women that are just better at the game than some. And Okana's been he's been around a long time, and he's conned some really smart people. And that's what Dal was in a way. Like Dal was just kind of like this kid con artist who he kind of conned everyone at the beginning, conned Gwyn into giving the command chair, conned Rock into having Rock help him bust out of the mining chains to get the protostar. He was that guy. And
sure.
And when you see like yourself in somebody else, you kind of bristle at that. Like, no, I'm that guy. You're not that guy. I'm that guy, right?
And yet, I would say Dahl has come a long way from those days and has learned a lot more than Okana ever will in life. He's learning to be responsible. He's learning to be a real captain. He's learning to be, I don't know, truthful to others as well as himself. Even though he had to go through a bit of a journey in this episode, I wanted to be mad at him when he took the genetic implant. But you know what? I can understand why in this moment of weakness where he is just so boggled by the fact that he probably will never meet his parents because he does not have any necessarily. He was born in a laboratory. That made the temptation way too great. And that is why he had to learn this lesson the hard way, like everybody does at some point in their life.
Right.
And we had to see it, and we had to have him go through it. And then when you learn those lessons, you never forget them. I think Dahl learned a great deal here.
They should pretty much rename the protostar like the USS School of Hard Knocks, because that's really what kind of like this, the series is. And you know what? Because it is, aimed at a certain age range. I mean, that is, kind of apparent. It doesn't necessarily mean that, the lessons that are being learned have to be watered down to a point where they become not as effective or not as clear or not as deliberate as they need to be. They very much are.
If anything, they're more direct than usual in this episode. I feel like they're very straightforward. They are showing, they are telling, and they're intertwining, and you can't miss it.
Do you think that most of the episodes so far, though, have been really kind of centered on Dal's like inability to find a certain peace within himself right now? But then again, we're expecting maybe a 15 to 17-year-old being who now his whole world has been turned upside down. How is he gonna find like where he belongs, where he can plant his feet when everything underneath him is just turned into kind of quicksand?
I think that is how he's feeling right now. And to answer your question, I'm really not sure. The only real stable adult figure he has is hologram Janeway. And if what he is yearning for, say it's finding like real parental figures that he can relate to, he may never find that. Is he going to come to some sort of semblance of peace of that?
Yeah.
We'll have to find out. I don't know. I have no predictions at this point because they're usually wrong.
Well, I mean, we're going to wrap up the show like here in a couple minutes. So if there's a final thought that you had, because usually sometimes, we have our final thoughts planned out, or sometimes they just happen to change organically. But I know that you had a lot to say. I was just hoping that you had a chance to say as much as you could.
Well, okay, let's wrap up with some final thoughts. I had to really think hard about like my own reaction to this episode, but how other people have reacted to this episode. Like, I think a lot of people agree that this story is very straightforward, and some people, like myself, might say that it's predictable and we're maybe being too hard on it. And it's because of what I explained earlier about being an adult and seeing what is coming and knowing it's going to be a disaster. But the power of what this might do for children and the conversations it might spark for families, both kids and adults, what they're thinking and feeling or the things that they have done, you cannot put a value on that. And if this episode succeeds in doing that, it is a winner. And I love it for that.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that was perfectly said. There's a thing that we do in Mission Log. We have the Mission Log Standard podcast. We have this, you see, Timmy, moral meanings and message moment like in the show, the bonk bonk on the head obviousness of the message. And for me, there was something that was very, very important that I just wanted to make sure that we covered, or at least like brought to light here before the end. So when Dal pretended not to care about the implant, and then, at the very end, like when everyone left, he talked to the doctors like, how fast can you do this? He wanted to do it because he wanted so badly to be cooler than Okona. But why? Why did he want that? Why was he like willing to kind of like put a lot of kind of like his own like personal morals aside that he's learned so far for that? Because there is still something in Dal that's eating away at him that he hasn't quite found peace with yet. And he just wanted to be cooler. He wanted to be better. He wanted to be everything for his crew. And that in and of itself is saying to us that Dal is changing, because before he wouldn't have cared about what any of them thought about his choice. He would have just done it because it's best for Dal.
Right.
But now he's in that position where like, okay, if this makes my crew value me higher, then I'm going to make that decision, even if it's a bad one. Right. So,
yeah, in his mind, he thinks this checks out and it fulfills maybe some insecurities he's got going on, too.
Yeah.
So maybe it's worth compromising your morals, but it's not. It isn't.
No. And he wants, since the very beginning, he's always wanted to be the captain, and he's learned a lot of things along the way. But this episode, I think he learned probably the most important thing about being a captain is that you can't think about what everyone else thinks about when you're a captain. You have to make the decisions, right or wrong, because you think that's the best thing for the crew, not for yourself. Right.
Good lesson there.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Well, is that it? Is that the end of our show already? My goodness.
I know.
Oh, well, thank you everybody for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. If you enjoyed our show, please make sure you like and share and subscribe and do all the things. And subscribe to the playlist for Mission Log Prodigy so you never miss any of our episodes. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment Production, and technical direction is by Earl Green. And our website for your opportunity to comment and connect with us is at missionlogpodcast.com. And if you would like to support Mission Log directly, and you really should, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
So thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be with us again. And we look forward to sharing our thoughts with you on episode 16 next week. And now, as we do with each and every standard episode of Mission Log Prodigy, we would like to leave you all with these very special incoming transmissions.
Receiving listener communications. Message playback begins.
What's your name?
Dietrich.
How old are you?
4.
Did you like the episode?
Yeah.
What was your favorite part?
When Murph was protecting the kids.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun part, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What did you learn? Did you learn any lessons?
Science rules and science needs rules.
Hello, my name is Lorelai and I am 11. And I like the episode. And my favorite part was when they let Murph out of his ball. And I learned that I really like this new version of Murph.
What's your name?
Lieutenant James.
How old are you?
7 years old.
Did you like the episode?
I love the episode.
What was your favorite part?
When Murph fought away the Romulans.
And did you learn anything?
I learned that science needs rules because in this episode, Dal transformed into all his species at once. So in science, you need to take time.
So what's your name?
Sarah.
How old are you?
7.
Did you like that episode?
Yes.
Okay. What was your favorite part?
When Murph went out and fought all those bad guys.
Oh, yeah. And what do you think the episode was trying to teach us?
If it's good to be true.
If it's too good to be true, then what? It probably is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what do you think? Do you think that was Gwen at the end, or does somebody look like her? What do you think?
Somebody that look like her.
I hope so, because she's a good person. So here's hoping something doesn't go bad down the line. All right, can you say bye?
Bye.
All right, what's your name and age?
My name is Rook, and my age is 7.
All right, Rook, did you like the episode?
Yes.
And what was your favorite part?
My favorite part was when Dow fighted all those people.
He beat up all the Romulans? He got really cool. All right, and what did you learn from the episode?
I learned that sometimes you don't want to be better than people.
He might have got too ambitious there?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Good job.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.